In this video, I'll cover all the basic bike maintenance that you might encounter when you're out on a ride in the middle of nowhere really far from a bike shop. I'm going to split it into 3 different sections. We got the wheels, so that'll be flat tire, spokes, drivetrain, that's going to be your chain and your gears, and then brakes. Here's a checklist for everything that I'm going to be following and showing in this video today. It's a step-by-step, it's incremental, and I also have some definitions that we can learn. This video is geared towards beginners, so I'm going to break every single step down into the most bite-sized chunks and not use a ton of jargon so that you can understand what I'm saying. Knowing how to fix these things has gotten me tens of thousands of miles on my bike, and hopefully it'll get you tens of thousands of miles more. You can do all of the maintenance in this video with only a few tools in your tool belt, so don't worry if you don't have much. You need a bike pump, tire levers, some Allen wrenches, and a flathead screwdriver. If you're just getting into tools, I would recommend you get a multi-tool because then you can also carry this on your rides. I have the Crank Brothers M17. Let's start with category 1, wheels. Let's start by talking about tire pressure. You need your tires to be inflated, otherwise your wheel is going to be bouncing on the ground on the metal. That's not good for anybody. And how do you know how much air to even put in your tires? There's a ton of research, science, and opinions about your tire pressure, but since this is a beginner-focused video, we got some simple rules that'll make it pretty easy to know. My advice, take the manufacturer's recommendation. Every single bike tire. I've never seen a bike tire without this unless it's from before the 1970s. But if you look around on your tire, at some point you're going to see something that says maximum PSI. Some wheels have tire pressures that are all the way down to 20 minimum, and others are all the way up to 120. It's really depending on the type of wheel, the type of riding you're doing. In the United States and England, we use PSI, pounds per square inch, to measure pressure. Other countries use bar. So PSI and bar are typically both on a tire, and we just got to look around and find where it says our maximum pressure. In my case, my maximum PSI says 50. What am I going to do? Probably not going to inflate all the way to the maximum. I'll inflate to 40, and I think that's good. So as a general rule of thumb with these tires, I'm going to try to keep the pressure around 40. If it drops down to 20, 30, something like that, that's when it's time to pump them back up. It's pretty good to just check your tire pressure before every single ride. Let's pump them up. One thing to note is there are 2 types of valves to pump air into. You have Schrader valves and you have Presta valves. Nowadays it's a lot more common to see Presta valves on bikes, but you can just look at the image on the screen of a Presta and a Schrader and then match it to your bike. See which one you have. Once you know which you have, then you can look at your pump. So your pump is going to have 2 different sized holes. One is a bigger hole and one is a smaller hole. The smaller goes for the Presta and the bigger goes for the Schrader. You could also just try the method of, oh, that side didn't fit, I'll just try the other side. On the Presta valve, you're going to need to unscrew a little knob before it'll accept any air. So that's what you do right here, what you see me doing. And then we're just going to put the pump on. Pumps come in a lot of different shapes and sizes, but in most cases, you're going to put the nozzle on and then lock it somehow. So that's this lever right here. I'm just going to lock it. Portable pumps might look a little different. So this portable pump doesn't have that lock. Instead, what I do is I screw the portable pump onto the valve. Okay, should be good. Let's just pump. Watch the number here. As the number gets pretty close to 40, I'm getting ready, and we're at 40. When I was younger, this part used to scare me, taking the nozzle off of the valve. When you let go of that lock, it's gonna go psh and let some air out. Nicer pumps might not have this issue, but I don't have a nicer pump, so I'm gonna have that little scary psh noise. Next issue. Say your tire's not just low on air, it won't hold any air. You have a flat tire. Have no fear, we can fix that. If you know how to fix something, you do not have to fear it. Before I teach you how to fix it though, there's 2 things we gotta think about. Tubes or tubeless. A lot of newer bikes now come tubeless, which means there isn't an inner tube keeping the tire inflated. It uses air pressure alone and some goop called sealant to keep the air inside of the tire. If you can hear any sealant sloshing around inside of the wheel, then you're tubeless. If you can't hear anything, you probably have a tube in. Just saying tubeless ready does not guarantee you have tubeless, and if you're a beginner, I would almost recommend starting with tubes because it's a lot easier to understand and maintain. Since this is a beginner focused video, I'm just going to be talking about cases where people have tubes inside their tire. I think tubeless is intermediate to advanced. Even though it has lots of benefits, it is harder to maintain. So I'll link in the description some videos about tubeless maintenance, fixing a tubeless flat, in case you do have a tubeless tire. For everyone else, let's fix your flat tire. The steps are as follows. Take off the back wheel, take off the tire, take out the tube, fix the issue, and then do all three in the reverse. Here's the gear list to fix a flat tire. We have tire levers, a miniature pump, or you could just use your whole pump, but if you're traveling somewhere, you probably want a miniature pump. A spare tube. The other week I wrote about my entire repair kit in my newsletter. I also cover things like awesome bike trails and bike routes, and then also current events. Like this bike trail got $10 million of funding to be built, things like that. So it's called the Bike Bulletin. I'll put a link down below. It's a 5 to 10 minute read for the email. It comes to your inbox every Thursday. Link to subscribe is in the description. Here's how you find the right tube for your bicycle. Say you go to a bike shop, what do you need to tell them, or what do you need to order online? You need the diameter of your wheel, and you also need the width of your tire. Where is that information? Just like the PSI, that information is also printed right on the rubber of the tube. So we're going to look around, whatever. Look for something with an X. So this wheel is 700 by 40 C. C is another thing for millimeters. I don't know why. Here's a different wheel. We got the PSI, but looking, kind of crossed out. I've actually worn down what it says. So it's 700, but it doesn't actually say what the size is. If we look, the measurement is maybe like 33, 34 C. Okay, older mountain bike. It's not going to be C anymore. Let's look for the X. Look for the X. Here we go. The X says 26 by 2.1. Finally, inches. What a relief. I forgot to mention you also need to pay attention to your valve type. I've accidentally bought a Schrader valve for my press to wheel, and literally somewhere on the trail I figured this out, and so I was a bit stranded. Figured it out, we were good though, but make sure you match your valve type to the tube that you buy. The cool thing about tires is they're stretchy, so if it's not a perfect match, I've put a 27.5 inch tube in a 29 inch wheel. It worked out fine. You can get away with a lot, and if you're close, that's okay. But if you're going to a bike shop or ordering from the internet, they usually have every possible size, so no need to settle. Let's take this wheel off. Shift to the smallest gear in the back. Trust me, this makes the whole world so much easier taking on and off your back wheel. To take off the back wheel, there are two types of axles you might have and two types of brakes. I know, I wish everything was standardized, but it's not, so we're gonna figure it out. The two types of axles are quick release and through axle. So quick release, you flip this lever down, it releases a lot of tension, unscrew it a little bit, and then the wheel comes off. A through axle unscrews and comes completely out before you can take your wheel on and off. Newer and higher price ticket bikes are going to have a through axle, and then older and lower price ticket bikes are going to have a quick release. Now your brake options, maybe you have disc brakes, or maybe you have rim brakes. Disc brakes, you don't have to do anything to take your wheel on and off. Rim brakes, on the other hand, you do have to do a little something. Every single form of rim brake has a release that you can find. So here's one form of release, here's another form of release, and this is how you give your tire space to come off. If you have rim brakes, let's release them so your tire has space to come out. If you have disc brakes, don't do anything. First, I'm going to show you how to take this wheel off with a through axle bike, and I'll also show you how to take the wheel off with a quick release. Unscrew the axle. Let's pull it out. Now there's nothing keeping my wheel in place except for the gears back here. If you're doing your front wheel, you've already taken it off. But let's be mindful of the gears and the chain. Put your hand like so, just position your body like I am right now, and then we're gonna just slide the bike out. If you're out on the trail and you got your bike with no wheel on now, make sure your chain does not get any dirt on it. That's the only thing we care about. So I'm gonna set it down nicely on the ground, keeping my chain above the ground. It is perfectly okay to flip your bike upside down. In fact, it makes it kind of easy. I'm going to show you how to take off the wheel for a bike that has a quick release and a rim brake. This bike actually can't balance upside down, so I'm just going to show it the other way. Step 0, shift to the smallest gear in the back. Step 1, release the brakes so the brakes are open and give the tire space to come out. Step 2, loosen the quick release. Don't unscrew the nut all the way, just unscrew the nut enough that the tire can start to move. Don't go too far, no need. See the derailleur? See this? See how we can move that piece right there, this spring-loaded piece? That's what we'll do. We'll push it back and then grab the wheel with your knees and just lift the bike off. There we go. And I'm just going to set this gently on the side so we don't get the chain in any of the dirt. We're going excavating for the tube. Make sure all of the air is out. This flat was pretty bad, so the air is definitely out. And I'm going to start on the opposite end from the valve. Tire levers. I'm going to kind of squeeze this around, break things up if need be. We're getting the lever just under the lip of the tire. We don't want to go crazy far, otherwise we won't have leverage. We'll get under just the lip of the tire and then peel it out over the rim. That's what we're doing here. So I'm going to use my fingers, pull it back just a little bit, and dig in there. There we go. We've got some space. Now I'm going to get a second one and just have it a little bit away, maybe like a tire lever length away. Start right next to it and we can slide it out. That's the trick there. Now we're just going to push them down. If you're not getting anywhere, it's okay. Maybe you have to redo. And so we're right here. This is where we're at now. We're going to use the leverage of here to slide out the rest of the tire over the lip. Okay, here we go. Slide it out. Boom. Now we can just slide out the other side. Slide to the right. Slide to the left. Boom. Around the whole wheel. You can take the whole tire off if you'd like. I try to save some time, and instead I only take half of it out because that's good enough to get the tube out. We got this half off, so I'm just going to go in there and excavate the tube. Kind of got to do a little finagling to get the valve out, but that's fine. But we're going to do some vocabulary now. This rubber that's on the outside is the tire. The rubber that was on the inside that keeps all the air in there, that's the tube. And all the metal stuff, carbon stuff, whatever you got, that is the wheel. This whole thing is the wheel. I'm big on patching. I'm a big fan of patching, but it is a little harder skill to learn. I'll link to some other resources for how to patch your tire, but if you're just starting out, no worries. You don't need to bother about that. You can just pop in a new tube and then you're good to go. If you are interested in patching your tubes, get something that's vulcanizing. That means it just becomes part of the rubber over time. That's instead of these sticker patches that are just barely good enough to get you home. The vulcanizing, I've had these last for years because it just becomes part of the rubber. And also, there's little instructions in there if you need. So even if you don't learn how to do it from this video, you could buy them and just learn on the road how to do it. Before you even think about putting the tube in here, we have to feel the inside. Something popped your tire in the first place, so let's make sure that it's not still in your tire. Odds are it's either there or it's not. I guess that's 100% odds. It's a tautology, but we want to make sure it's not there. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. And when it is, it's really good feeling. Then you know, like, it's not going to pop your tire again. Common beginner mistake. I've done this plenty of times where I don't feel the inside of my tire and then the thorn or the staple or the nail that was in my tire just pops my next tire. It's so frustrating. 2 flats in 5 minutes, like, statistically unlikely. What is more likely is that something's in there just re-popping your tube. So feel around, good. Fetch your functional tube, your patch tube, new tube, whatever you decided to do, and let's figure out how to get this back in the wheel. Step 1, to make everything a little easier, grab your pump, and we're just going to add a tiny bit amount of air in here so that it keeps a circular shape. But we don't want to add too much because then it makes it difficult. So we're just going to get just enough that it's a little circular. If you want to seem super cool and flex on all your friends, right here we got it. You have to push this in with your tongue, but we can do this with our mouth. Yeah, that's the biggest flex. I saw my dad do this once and I was like, so cool. So now we got a bit of shape into the tube. This is going to make everything so much easier. Next step, locate where the valve goes. You're going to be looking on the rim, looking. Where's that hole? Where's that hole? Okay, right there. Oh yeah, there we go. So there's the hole that the valve goes into. That's where we're going to start. If you took your tire all the way off for this process, put your tire halfway on. Get half your tire on the rim, and then you're back up to speed with me. Half on, half off. Pull it back so that there's space. Then I'm going to slide in my valve. Okay, that's all the way in. Let's bring it over. We got it half on, half in. The valve is right there. And then just insert into the tire. Time to get the other half on. Start with the valve. This is where I like to start. And just with your fingers, you can probably peel it up on. And see how I'm going equal on both sides? As I get it here, then I go equal further and further around, wrestling it onto the wheel. Okay, we're halfway. I'm just going to flip the whole thing. Now we got to keep wrestling. And right here is where things get a little frustrating, because you got to bend the rubber, and sometimes the rubber has to be tight on your wheel, and it's not going to be easy. So here's some strategies. So if you just can't wrestle it on with your hands, strategy number 1, flip it all the way upside down to where you started, and I'm pulling. See, it's already on both sides right here, and I'm going to pull around and stretch it and bring more. Okay, we got to flip it. Pull, and dink. Okay, say that didn't work. That'll help a bit. Let's get to strategy 2. So I'll pull this off just a little bit. Strategy 2. We get to right here. We've done the flip upside down and pull thing. It's not working. We're going to use this as a lever. When you use this as a lever, you might accidentally pinch the tube in there and create another flat. So just be careful. Get it. Okay, hook is facing in toward the wheel. I'm going to slide that in there so I just barely get to the rim. And I'm going to lift. Lift. You might need to do the second one if you want. And we lift it over the rim. It might take you a couple tries. That is perfectly okay. And bumper up. If your portable pump doesn't have a pressure gauge, you're just going to have to go by feel. The way you get a good feel is when you're at home and you have a pump with a pressure gauge, just keep feeling your tire a bit. If it's super squishy, maybe not. If it's super hard, probably not. But you'll get a feel for what 40 psi or what 80 psi, whatever your dedicated psi number is, you'll kind of get a feel for it. And if it's not perfect, that's okay. Rotate. This will give a better angle. Where we put our hands on the derailleur, what shifts our gears back here, is going to be very important, making it easier to get the tire on and off. To start, let's just bring our tire all the way in and get our chain on the right gear. Remember how we shifted to the very smallest gear? So we're just going to set the chain on there. That's going to make things a little easier. Now the derailleur. The derailleur goes behind the whole wheel, but right now, since the springs have no force against them, they're too far forward. So we have to bring the whole apparatus back so that the wheel has space to shift down. This is all I'm going to do. And then we have space. And you also have to drop the disc, there we go. Drop the disc brake rotor down into the brake calipers, which are right here. Finagle, and we are fully dropped in. Final step is putting the through axle back in the appropriate place. Start on the brake side, not the gear side. Brake side, that's where this goes in. And it's going to be a bit of finagling. This is all about finagling, which is one reason why bike maintenance can be frustrating. And we got to get it to screw in over here. Oh, there we go. I just heard a little pop. I know it's all lined up. So righty tighty. If you're forcing it, that's bad. It shouldn't feel forced. It should feel pretty smooth. Sometimes I just can't get it to go. I just can't get it to go. It's pretty frustrating. So what do I do then? I press forward as I twist a little bit. Sometimes that's good enough to get it to catch. Another thing you can try, spin it in the reverse direction. You'll hear it, there we go, there it clicked. And that means the threads are lined up and we can start going forward. You can look through this side to see if it's lined up or not, because your wheel could just be a little crooked, so it might not be going in the right direction. Regardless, see how I backed up a little bit, heard a little click, and now we're lined up, righty-tighty. Let's go. How tight? This is just like finger tight. We're gonna go a little past finger tight. Now, quick release and rim brakes. Time to get the wheel back on. I got the wheel, got the bike. We're just gonna do the reverse now. Pick it up, and I'm gonna sit the wheel in between my legs. If your bike's upside down, then you don't have to worry about any of this rigmarole, but if your bike's not upside down, then this is the technique that I like. Remember on the derailleur how we had to push back? It's gonna be a little different now. So we have to get it in the middle of the chain. We're shooting for the gears inside the middle of the chain, okay? Now it's all about finagling here. See how I can push that, and it makes things, see it wrap around a little more. So I'm going to pull this back, get the chain lined up to that smallest gear, and now it's just kind of going to drop down. Where am I dropping down to? I'm dropping so that this piece can land on the skewer. Nice and easy. It's about finesse here, and the more you do it, the easier it gets. We're on. So we got to go back and re-screw it in. What you're shooting for is just about touching the metal, but not quite, and it's going to be a little hard to push it to get that close. We got the lever. It's curved, the curved part touching, and I'm just going to screw it tight from there. Okay, now we got to loosen the lever up, maybe go a half turn, try it again. I could go a little tighter, just like 1/8 of a turn. Oh, that's perfect. It's not quite touching, just about. Let's clip the brakes back together. And we have an issue. The brakes are rubbing. Your wheel is probably angled a little bit one way or the other, so we got to re-angle it so it's centered within the axle. Voila! If you get stuck on any of the steps in this video, you can comment, you can send me an email, happy to respond. The final thing to check with your wheels is your spokes. So, easy way for a beginner to know if their spokes are good or bad is the tone that they make when you touch them. If it's nice and resonant, that is a good spoke. If it's not, if it's a dud and just kind of makes no noise, your spoke might be cracked, your spoke might be loose, something like that. If you'd like to fix your own spokes, I've linked to another video that shows you how to fix your own spokes. Again, I'd say that's an intermediate to advanced skill that you don't need to learn right away. You can ride on a broken spoke, just be careful if more than one spoke breaks. If you've broken one spoke and you have that dun dun, or you see the spoke literally on your bike snapped, you can ride, that's okay. Just don't go crazy, don't have 1,000,000 pounds on you, don't hit any jumps, because if you break a second spoke, then it's even easier to break a third spoke and a fourth spoke. So just ride cautiously and go to a bike shop and they'll be happy to fix it for you. Moving on to part 2, the drivetrain. For the drivetrain, we'll take care of the chain and then figure out any issues with shifting. If you got any clicking, if your gears don't shift smoothly, we're going to do the basics of figuring those out. This activity is going to wear and tear your bike. That's accepted, but let's try to minimize the amount of wear and tear that's going to happen. So every 100 miles, maybe every 100 kilometers, whichever metric you want to use, that's when you should be maintaining your chain. If your chain gets wet, say you've ridden through the rain, let's put some lubricant on it. I have muck off and then finish line, those are the ones I've used, but really anyone's going to do an okay job. How do you apply it to your bike? When I'm somewhere camping, I'm just going to find a place to lean my back tire on. That's the trick. You don't need to lean your whole bike up against something. I'm just going to lean my back tire and my whole bike is going to stay up. And then we have a good workspace to put lubricant down on our chain. You also need a rag. I use the rag to clean up my chain first and clean off the extra lube after. Step 1. Get all the current gunk off of your chain. Do this as best you can with the rag. So I'm just going to go through, clean all my links with the rag. If there's a lot of gravel and dirt in your chain, you could even use your water bottle to squirt the water and clean your chain off. Next, Find the quick link on your chain. If you have an older bike, you might not have a quick link, but if you have a newer bike or a newer chain, you'll probably have a quick link somewhere. So I find the quick link, and that's the link I'm going to start and end the lubricant at. My preference is to go slow, get lubricant on every single roller. You want it to get in between all the moving pieces. You don't just want to go on top, you don't want it to go on the side. You want it to get in between the moving pieces because those are the things that are going to wear down and cause your chain to get longer and longer. Every single one. And then after we get every single link, which I've done here, just work it into your chain a bit. Maybe a few rotations like this, just so that we know that the lubricant is actually getting inside of the chain, and I'm going to let it sit. And then you don't want all that extra lube on your chain. That'll just cause things to get greasier and dirtier. So what I do after it's been worked into my chain, or I've let it sat overnight, is I take the rag again, and then I just wipe off the excess. Now I mentioned that the chain might get stretched out after a while. The metal in between each links gets worn down and your chain gets longer and longer over time. At some point after it's gotten long enough, your shifting does not work well. So the problems of bad shifting could either be a worn out chain or just misaligned shifting. So if your chain has been fine, your shifting has been fine for 1,000 miles, and then all of a sudden, man, it's getting really, really bad. And I've lubricated my chain, so that's not the issue. And your shifting just is not crisp anymore, it could be because your chain is stretched out. This tool right here is called a chain checker, and it tells me if my chain has worn out and stretched 0.5% or 0.75%. Once it's stretched 0.5%, should probably switch it out. And once it's stretched 0.75%, if I don't switch it out, I'll start wearing down my other components. Sometimes I've had a chain get stretched out after 1,000 miles on a particularly grimy and dirty stretch. If you're going through a town on your bike trip, you could stop by a bike shop and then ask them for a chain checker so you can check if your chain's actually worn out. But say your chain's not worn out, but you're still having shifting issues. That's probably an alignment issue. Totally normal, totally something we can fix. See how the chain is running through the derailleur here, perfectly up into the gear? And now when I switch the derailleur to one gear up, it pulls the chain with it. What's required is that the derailleur is aligned nicely with the gear of the cassette. These need to be perfectly in alignment, and if they're a little off, there's going to be some grinding and clicking, and things aren't going to shift when you want them to shift. I was pretty scared of the derailleur until I sat down and paid very close attention to a 30-minute Parktool YouTube video. So I'll link that video down in the description. But for now, since this is a beginner tutorial, I'll just give you a quick rundown of an easy adjustment that might solve your problems. Here's an example of bad shifting. I'm going to go up one gear, but the chain doesn't go. You can see it wants to shift. It's doing this little click thing, but it's not getting there. To diagnose this, let's look behind your bike. And you're looking at it, do you see a nice straight line up and down? If not, then it needs some adjustment. Something happened somewhere. I would check your wheel, see if your axle is loose, see if your cassette is loose. I've had all these be problems. If none of the above, then let's adjust the shifting. There's a barrel adjuster right here, and so this is what I'm going to use to get it perfectly in alignment. Lefty-loosey on the barrel adjuster, the derailleur will go to the left. Righty-tighty on the barrel, and the derailleur will go to the right. Start at your very bottom gear and shift up. Does it shift up nicely? No, we see that. So we're going to take the barrel adjuster and move it just a little bit so it goes up. Counterclockwise on the barrel adjuster pushes the derailleur up. Okay, we've moved it. So now when we click the shift button, it goes up really nicely and smoothly, and we click the down button and it also goes back smoothly. Now, there is another scenario where it goes up smoothly, but it does not go down smoothly. So how do we figure that out? Barrel adjuster clockwise. We've just solved some bad shifting. Finally, the brakes. Remember, I said there were two types of brakes. We had disc brakes and then we have rim brakes. I'll talk about both, and the common problems with either are going to be the same, but the ways you adjust it are going to be a little different. Sometimes with disc brakes, things are finicky, things get contaminated, things are super confusing. I've gone through the whole run of it. In the end, if I can't figure out my issue, I just replace the brake pads, and I've even had to replace the brake rotors. They're a fickle being, and that is just part of life. If the brake pads are not braking strong enough, then my suggestion is either you have to clean in there or you have to replace your brake pads. So let's see how you do that. I'm going to show first on disc brakes, and then I'll show with rim brakes. Disc brakes, we gotta take off the wheel. For stigma prevention, I'm gonna flip my bike upside down just so we can see it like that. We're just gonna wipe down any gunk that's in there. So you need a paper towel or a rag or something, and we can just kind of slice it in. That gap right there is what we wanna make sure we're cleaning. And that is hundreds of miles of brake pad dust. You also wanna clean this part, but please be careful. You don't wanna get any oils on this, as in hands. So I'm not going to touch this with my hand. I don't want to contaminate it with other stuff. So make sure you have a clean portion to do this. And I'm just going to wipe it down. If you get too much oil on here, all of a sudden all that dust starts to accumulate on the rotor. And that causes bumping, squeaking, and no braking power. You just gotta be careful about that. If cleaning your pads doesn't do anything, or you don't have any pad left, it's gonna be time to swap out your brake pads. You can tell I have a good amount of pad left. That's the end of the pad, and this is all the pad that can be worn down still. Instead, these pads could look like this, which means I definitely need some replacing. This screw right here holds a whole thing in there. That's what we gotta get out. That screw is held in by this pin, so I'm going to take that pin out. Do not lose it. Mine just happens to be a screw. Yours might be a pin that you got to bend to get out. But let's just unscrew that. Do not lose this piece either. Squeeze the outside on both of them, and we're just going to pull. Ding. If you're not sure what replacement pads to buy, you could just take these straight up to the bike shop, or hopefully written on there is some little code. And this mine says L05ARF. These pads are fine, no squeaking, there's plenty of life left. I'm just gonna wipe them down while I got them out. And I'm also gonna wipe down inside of this caliper here. Grab your pads. They're gonna be labeled right and left probably, at least mine are. So we got this little spring. Spring goes in the middle, fits nicely right around where the existing pad material is. Dink, and dink. Notice that the spring has a little hole. That hole has a hole on the brake pads, and that's where the pin you took out lines up. So we got to think about that. It's about lined up. Now we have to go in from this side. I'm going to be pinching, and you can watch the pads go in. Notice the left and the right. We got to pay attention to that. This is the left side of the bike. The outside is the left side. And I'm pinching, and I'm just placing them into the caliper as far as they can go. Next up, let's put back the pin and the linch pin that I know you didn't lose because I told you not to lose them. You might just have a pin. That's okay. The pads come in different shapes and sizes, but it's just going to be sliding through here. And if you're lucky, everything lines up. Usually you're not lucky. But here is our luck machine. And I'm just going to fix that middle thing so that it lines up with the rest of the holes. Get an idea. It is too far in, so I need to bring it out just a little bit. Come on. Oh, there we go. And we're all the way through. Let's screw it in. And finally, this little linch pin is just going to kind of pinch onto the outside. If you just replaced your pads, you might have an issue where the pads are too close where the rotor won't fit into the brake. And all of a sudden it's like, man, they're too close, or like, oh, it's rubbing so bad. So if you put new pads in, here's what you got to do. I have a dedicated tool for this where it slides right in, and I can kind of push it on both sides. Whatever you do, don't use something sharp, because a knife is going to mess up your pad and then cause them not to break as well. If you don't have a fancy tool like this, you can just use a tire lever where it fits in there, and you can just kind of wiggle it around to create this extra space. Drop the wheel back on, and problem number 2 that could come up, say it fits in okay, but you get a rubbing, like every half rotation, it's like duh, 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 duh. We're gonna have to adjust the position of your brake. Put your axle back on. Remember, going from the rotor side. If you're getting a little bit of rubbing, you need to move this piece side or side to get it out of the way of this guy. So what we're gonna do, this bottom one gets to be fully loose, And then this top piece, just make that a little loose. So now this can shift just a little bit. See how that's shifting? I'm going to pull my front brake down. Ding, dit, dit, dit. That is centering this where it should be on the rotor. So as I hold the front brake down, then I'm just going to tighten everything back up. Keep holding the front brake down. But you can hear that we have some rubbing. So I'm going to redo that process. Find the spot where it's rubbing. Right there. That's where I'm going to hold it. Nice and loose, just a little loose. Okay, we got some movement, that's good. And now front brake, holding it with one hand and going to tighten with the other. Okay, that's tight enough to check. Fully loose. And no rubbing. You might have to play that game for a little while and also just manually push it. You're like, oh, it's rubbing on the left side, so I'll push it to the right a little bit. And it's just like everything else on this bike. So very much an art, and you'll get better at it with more practice. Rim brakes are a whole lot easier to service than disc brakes. You got 3 options, probably more. You got caliper, cantilever, and V. For these V brakes, I'll just search V brake pads into Amazon or wherever, your local bike shop. There's still some pad left in these guys, so we don't need to replace them. If you do have to replace them, it's pretty easy. I've already released mine. And we're just going to get in there with the right tool. So it's the hexagon 5mm hex wrench. Just loosen it up and unscrew it. You might have to chase it around a little bit. Okay. Remember all these spacers. Remember the spacer position, because that'll help you. Now say, I got my fresh pads. Let's put it back on. There is a bit of finesse and art to this again too. And we're gonna shimmy that in there. Back with all the spacers. Get it just about tight, but it can still slide around a bit, because we need to place it in the right spot. If I place it down here, when I actually squeeze, it's not even going to hit the rim. We want it to be nicely on the rim and also parallel with the rim. So like right here is a great spot. I'm going to hold it there, pressing, and support the bottom right there. And let's get that a little tighter. Now a lot tighter. It's going to want to twist on you, so just keep a hand down here. Now that we got the spot right, I can just pick it up. But yeah, it's going to want to twist on you. Not on my watch. Okay, and pretty good alignment right there. Nice. Reattach. And we got fresh brakes. That's all the maintenance you probably need to know to survive your next bike tour. Frankly, I know people who have survived bike tours and known less. They haven't even been able to change a flat tire. So if you don't know how to change a flat, that shouldn't stop you from going for a bike trip. I recommend you learn how to change it, but it's not a necessity. You might just get a little bit stranded, have to check YouTube. That's okay. Let me know if you have other questions, and that's a wrap.